Hey, you're watching Connected Digital World, and we're here to talk about the story of the Bureau, XCOM Declassified.
Hi, Andrew from Connected Digital World here. I recently visited 2K Marin Studios in San Francisco to take a look at the Bureau XCOM Declassified. While I was at the studio, I got to see a lot more of the game and also talk to various people who were involved in its creation. In this video, we interview Erik Caponi, who's the lead narrative designer on the Bureau XCOM Declassified. This is the second part of our two-part interview. Enjoy. What got you started in narrative design and storying?
Poor decision making on my part. I started out making movies, and I realized I wasn't really getting what I wanted out of making movies because it's just kind of you watch a movie and they're an incredibly expressive art form, but it's also very controlled. Every audience member sees literally the same images, hears literally the same sounds, and then interprets them from there. Games to me were more like setting up the audience to participate in the story. That's not like it, that's what it is. And that to me was compelling because once you put the controller in a player's hand, your control over what they're doing is then gone. If they want to stare at a wall and fire at their shoes for 3 hours, they can do that. Because what was then interesting to me was creating worlds for people to tell themselves stories rather than just sitting down and telling somebody a story like I was when I was making movies. And games were always a love of mine. And back in the time before time when I was in school, there wasn't really a concept of like a game design degree or anything. So I ended up going to school for film and for computer science. I double majored. I figured like maybe I could go make a video game with that. And then I kind of looped in with some people who were doing a little startup and just kind of spun out from there and figuring out that my interest was really in the storytelling aspect of games. And then meshing that with the actual game design as much as possible because there's a tendency to treat the things as separate and they're not separate at all.
And so what are some of the games that you've worked on?
The first game I shipped that actually made it out the door and onto a game shelf was The Matrix Online, the MMO. I did about 500 of the quests in that game, and then from there I moved across the country to Rockville, Maryland, and I was at Bethesda for a while. I worked on Oblivion and a number of its DLCs, and Fallout and most of its DLCs. Or Fallout 3, rather, just to be specific about which one. I don't want to take credit for the actual original Fallout. So yeah, I worked on Fallout 3 and most of its DLCs. Kind of the beginning of Skyrim, a little under a year in pre-production, and then I moved up to Big Huge Games and was in charge of the narrative department for Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning.
So do you have a particular favourite genre, or do you not mind what you write for as long as it's something that interests you?
You mean fictional genre or game genre?
Both.
I don't want to pigeonhole myself. I like to kind of bounce around. That's one thing that really attracted me to this project is that it was different. The 60s setting and just kind of what we were trying to do here was really cool and it didn't feel like a retread of anything. So I was like, that's cool. I want to go try that because I've done post-apocalyptic, I've done fantasy, I've done kind of licensed stuff with The Matrix. And really, I have a lot of interests and a lot of places I want to go and explore, and I don't want to just become like the fantasy writer who everything I do is about elves.
And what are you working on next once this game ships? And I know you can't tell me.
I can't, because we're focused so hard on getting the Bureau XCOM Declassified out of the door.
That is brilliant. I really like that, rather than everyone else is like, I can't tell you. So that was
we have some thoughts about where we want to go, and a lot of types of games we're thinking about making, and a lot of stuff we want to try out, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay. No, that's good. Were you guys concerned in any way that people were going to say, oh, it's Men in Black, it's the X-Files, oh, that story's been done before?
Wait, are you implying that gamers really look for any sort of comparison to then invalidate what they're seeing?
No.
You're going to get comparisons no matter what you do, because it's how people process things as they look back at what they know. And I think good things are a mixture of what you know and something new. And there's always going to be comparisons, no matter what you're making. So yeah, I mean, we kind of knew those were going to come, and in some cases we played to them, and in some cases we kind of lampooned and defined them a bit, where we knew we were going to get compared to something and just kind of twisted it around. For the most part, it doesn't really concern me that much. I think particularly our setting, our gameplay, I don't really know of analogs that exist inside of games. Our gameplay, has a lot of influences, but it is unique in the space, and I don't think there's any other period story like ours that I can think of.
And obviously this is an origin story, so it's not the first. It's the first XCOM story, but it's not the first XCOM game. So did you have trouble, or did you have concerns that you had to kind of fit this into existing lore? And were you concerned that you might do something that would invalidate something in another game?
It's actually a fun challenge to go back and try to make something that came before and look at the questions that you yourself asked about those things, and then develop the answers to those questions. Clearly mystery is a large part of XCOM, and you don't leave this game with all of your questions answered, but plugging that stuff in is actually a fun little game of logic. And fortunately for us, there hasn't been a strong narrative XCOM game yet, so there was a lot of space we could go as long as we stayed true to statements that had been made, and in the cases where we did contradict anything, that there'd be a reason for it, like mostly a matter of perception, or what somebody thought they knew wasn't really what they know, but it wasn't like just flat wrong.
So when, obviously you talked about the process earlier on for creating the story, how many people actually work on the narrative and the story elements with you?
We had 3 writers, and our cinematic staff was, I want to say 6 or 7. I could count them. But for a game like this, which actually has a lot of writing content in it, generating as much as we did with only 3 people and myself overseeing them was a pretty brisk task, let's say, because there's actually a ton of stuff. All of the branching dialogue, all of the narrative discoverables and explorable things that you can find. There's a ton of stuff there.
Okay. And obviously you mentioned that you only came into the story about a year ago. Has the story changed significantly when the game changed, or was it always a very similar story, but it's just the mechanics of the game's changed from first person to third person?
Like I said before, there was a lot of cycle in the story and who the characters were as different versions of the game evolved, but this version of the story has stayed pretty consistent with this version of the game.
And do you want to tell us a little bit about William Carter as a character?
When we meet him, he's a guy with issues. He's kind of a washed up drunk. He's had some problems in his life that we'll explore through the course of the game, where he should have been fired many times over. He's kind of a known drunk. He fell out of favor with everybody, but he's been protected by the guy who becomes the first director of XCOM, because Carter was a good agent. He still has potential, and that's kind of what Director Falk does. He finds these people that he knows are good, but nobody else believes in, and pulls them out into his project. And Carter's been acting as a delivery boy, essentially, and as a replacement for getting fired. And he's making one of these deliveries at Groom Range when the aliens attack, and he gets this opportunity to come shine and be the guy he once was. And throughout the course of the game, it's interesting to follow along with him as he reacts to the things he learns and finds out that the invasion is a little more personal to him than he thought it was.
Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
If you missed part 1, you can watch it by clicking on the screen now. Also, if you haven't seen it yet, why not watch the Art of the Bureau interview with art director Jeff Weir by clicking on the screen now. And if you haven't subscribed to us, please click on the button for more interviews, gameplay footage, and lots more.